Hello and welcome to the lecture on Aristotle's virtue ethics. This is the third of the big three theories we will cover: utilitarianism, Kant's deontology, and Aristotle's virtue ethics. Virtue ethics comes in many forms, just as we mentioned that there are forms of utilitarianism other than hedonistic at-utilitarianism, which is the form we studied. We will be looking primarily at Aristotle's version of virtue ethics here today. As with all the other theories, we will be breaking down virtue ethics into an anatomy. You should know this anatomy cold by now. It consists first in a theory of the good, that is to say, what the good is. Then there needs to be some justification of why this is the good. The second part of the anatomy is the method for achieving or being good, and then this usually has a justification as well, though sometimes it is pretty straightforward. The anatomy of virtue ethics is as follows. Happiness is the good. The justification for this is the same as it was at hedonistic at-utilitarianism. Remember when we did the thought experiment, where you wrote down what you most wanted, then wrote down why you wanted it, and then why you wanted that thing, and then why you wanted that thing, and so on, until there was something you wanted for its own sake. Aristotle also believed that what you ended up with was happiness. It is important to note, however, that happiness means something a little bit special for Aristotle. For Aristotle, unlike hedonists or utilitarians, happiness wasn't pleasure alone. It consisted of your life as a whole, having a place in society, what others thought of you, having flourishing social relationships, and so forth. Human beings are fundamentally social animals for Aristotle, and you can be hurt even by things you don't know about, say such as having a bad reputation you do not know about, even if it never directly hurts you or causes you pain. These are all part of happiness for Aristotle. The method for achieving the good is to practice the virtues. And we'll talk about the justification for this a little bit later. A little bit more on Aristotle's concept of happiness. Happiness for Aristotle is everything involved in living a good life. It includes not just pleasure, but having a good social reputation, friends, family, and so forth. Also note that for Aristotle, a life cannot be truly judged as happy until it is over. Happiness isn't a matter of moments, but a matter of the life seen as a whole, and until it is over, some tragedy might strike. Imagine, for example, that you seem to be living a good life. You spend your life dedicated to some cause that is very important to you. You have good friends and seem to have contributed to what you care most about. Then, in the last months of your life, something terrible happens. Maybe it is completely unfounded, but something happens that destroys your reputation. As a result, you end up damaging the cause you care so much about. You damage it so much that you cause far more damage to the cause than any good you might have done for it during your life. You die having lost the respect of your family and friends as well. In spite of having so many pleasurable moments, and a life that looks like it was going so well, Aristotle would not call such a life a happy one. This is why he says that we cannot judge somebody to have had a happy life until they have died. Most importantly, happiness involves living a life appropriate to humanity. For Aristotle, this means exercising one's rational abilities. Simply living the life of a party animal, say, even if you had lots of friends and social relationships, wouldn't do for Aristotle. Human beings are fundamentally rational, social animals. In order to understand Aristotle's theory fully, we need to talk a little bit about the importance of function under his view. When Aristotle looks at the world, he sees many objects in terms of functions. He might say that the function of the sun is to warm the earth, or that the function of rain is to water plant life. Essentially, what he is saying is that this is why these things exist. They are in some way supposed to do these things. Typically, natural phenomena like these are not seen in this way anymore, at least not in the sciences. He also sees the same thing in regards to people's activities. So, the function of a good general is to command armies well. The function of a good potter is to make good pottery. And the function of a good horse trainer is to train horses well. This is known as the teleological worldview. Everything is seen to have a purpose or function. The teleological worldview is important to the theory because Aristotle believes that in order to be happy, a thing has to flourish, be what it is in the best possible way. So in order to answer the question regarding how it is that human beings can best be happy, he first has to ask what the function of human beings or of humanity is. Our previous example gives functions of human beings in particular jobs: potter, horse trainer, and so forth. But Aristotle wants to know about humanity in general. What is it that makes human beings special as humans? Aristotle talks about the three functions of the soul. It is important to note that when Aristotle talks about the soul here, he is talking about what seem to be mysterious life functions, not the sort of afterlife or personal identity or ghostly conception of the soul you may be thinking of. But the three functions of the soul, he means the three characteristics he identified living things as being able to do that inanimate objects do not seem to be able to do, and which could not be explained with the science of the day. These were first functions like growth, living, reproduction, and so forth. Second, functions like sensing and consciousness. And third, the function of reason. So Aristotle asks, what is it that human beings uniquely do that other beings cannot? So he asks, could our special function be to simply live, survive, grow, and reproduce? No, he answers, because plants do these things. Well then, could our special function be to live a life of the senses? Sight, sounds, pleasures, and so forth. No, he says, because animals are able to do these things. So this cannot be unique to humanity. Dogs, cats, birds, any conscious animal can do these things. So what does this leave? The one function of the soul that Aristotle thinks is left, the one that humans are capable of, but which other living beings are not, is the ability to reason. Thus, living a life of reason is key to flourishing as a human being for Aristotle. So, the good then for a human being is to lead a life of good activity, which requires reason both in terms of using reason and obeying reason. The activity part is important here. Even though reason is key for Aristotle, life isn't just about contemplation. One engages in life. Life isn't just about having the potential to do things, it is about actually doing them. An excellent musician, for example, isn't one that can create good music, it is one who actually does create good music. An excellent painter is not somebody who can produce great paintings, but one who actually does create great paintings. If Picasso decided never to paint, he would not be a great painter according to Aristotle, even if he had the potential to do all the same great works. Performing these good activities, that is to say, doing them in an excellent way, for Aristotle is expressing virtue. A virtue, by the way, is an excellence. That's what the word means. There are two main types of intellectual virtues for Aristotle: virtues of thought and virtues of character. We could also talk about virtues of body and virtues that apply to objects, but we don't need to worry about that here. Virtues of character are the moral virtues. Virtues of thought would include things like memory and other intellectual capacities. They might help one have virtuous character by helping one learn right from wrong, but they are not the moral virtues themselves. Since ultimately living a good life requires actions, and actions express one's character, Aristotle is concerned, as far as ethics is concerned, with virtues of character. When you act, you are expressing your character through your actions. And, as we will see in a way that is important to the method for this theory, you are also building your character through the learning process and the formation of habits. It is important to remember that, even though this theory is called virtue ethics, for Aristotle, virtues themselves are not the good. The virtues are excellencies of character. Happiness is the ultimate good. Virtues help us achieve happiness. Virtues are aspects of character that are useful, or even necessary, for living a good human life. For Aristotle, living a virtuous life does not guarantee a happy life, but doing so makes a happy life much more likely. Also, such a life is probably impossible without virtue. Likewise, and this is important, You cannot say that somebody is virtuous because of one or two virtuous acts. Aristotle is famous for saying that, just as one or two swallows do not make a spring, one or two courageous acts during a lifetime of cowardice do not make a person courageous, nor does one or two acts of honesty make one honest, or one or two acts of generosity make one generous. We often see movies where a cowardly character does something brave at the end and then dies, and the implication is that this person is somehow redeemed by this. But Aristotle would not say that this person died having the virtue of bravery by just performing one brave deed in a lifetime of cowardice. Character traits are traits that become reliable parts of ourselves, and virtues, like happiness, are judged over a lifetime. You don't have a virtue of courage or generosity or honesty or any other virtue until you exercise this virtue by habit. So, how can we gain the virtues? According to Aristotle, people are not naturally virtuous, nor are people naturally opposed to virtue. Aristotle reasons that if virtue were natural in us, then we would not have to learn it, and could not learn it differently. But we can. For example, birds do not need to be taught how to build nests. They know how naturally. Crickets do not need to be taught how to chirp. They just know how. On the other hand, virtues are not against our natures either. This is because if virtue were against our natures, then we could not learn to act virtuously. Being able to will yourself to change the color of your skin like a chameleon is against our natures. You cannot learn how to do this no matter how hard you try. You cannot learn how to breathe underwater like a fish. It is simply not in our natures, nor the nature of any other mammal. We might be able to make a machine that allows us to do something similar, but we cannot simply learn how to breathe underwater as a skill. Those things are unnatural to us. But virtues are not like that. We can learn the virtues. We can learn to be honest or courageous or generous. They are like skills or arts in this respect. We can learn them in the same way that we can learn flute playing or handwriting or computer programming. So that should give you the secret right there. Aristotle likens the virtues in many ways to crafts, trades, and skills. People gain virtues by practicing them and becoming habituated into acting in a virtuous way. Once they gain a virtue, they act virtuously automatically. They do not have to think about the right thing to do. Think about yourself when you first learned to drive. Originally, you had to think about all the rules of the road. You had to consciously scan the street for potential dangers. Now you do all these things, but you do them automatically, and your mind is free for the higher level tasks of an excellent driver, such as planning the best route, scanning further ahead for extra safety, and so forth. What is important here is that a person cannot gain a virtue without practicing it. Even natural musicians have to practice and practice to become great pianists and violinists. The same is true for the virtues according to Aristotle. One word for this is habituation. People gain virtues like other habits. For example, a good carpenter. But what exactly are the virtues? So far all we have said about them is that they are good habits, ways of living that promote a good life. This is currently too vague to be useful. Aristotle helps us to sharpen the definition. So now the time has come to define what a moral virtue is more precisely. So far we know that a virtue is an excellence of character, but how do we identify this type of character trait? For Aristotle, a virtue of character is a character trait that is a mean between two extremes. One extreme is the extreme of excess, that is to say, too much of the character trait. The other extreme is the extreme of deficiency, that is to say, too little of the character trait. Here, take a look at this chart. This represents a possible spectrum of a character trait. The extremes of the character trait, having too much or too little of it, are called vices. There are two vices, a vice of excess and a vice of deficiency. The virtue is having the exact right amount of the character trait. This is the so-called mean amount, the amount between two extremes such that having any more would be too much and any less would be too little. It is important to note that this isn't the same thing as saying that it has to come exactly between the two vices. The virtue is the amount that is the perfect amount, so to speak, such that, again, any more would be too much and any less would be too little. This is the essence of what a virtuous character trait is. Here is a specific example to help make the point more clear. Let's take the virtue of bravery. There are two vices for every virtue: a vice of excess and a vice of deficiency. Let's look at the vice of deficiency first. This is having too little of the trait. If you don't have enough courage, then you are said to be a coward. So cowardice is the vice. In this case, we have a nice clear word for the vice, but it's okay if there is no single word for it. You can use a phrase. Whether or not there is a single word for the concept or not is just a matter of what language one is speaking. We are concerned with concepts here. But is there such a thing as having a trait that exemplifies bravery in too great of a quantity? Yes, there is. You might have a hard time thinking of a single word for it, but one good word is foolhardy. Somebody who is foolhardy takes foolish risks for rewards that are not worthwhile. So a person with the virtue of bravery would perhaps be willing to run into a burning building to save a person if she or he felt that there was a reasonable chance of success. A cowardly person would not run in even if there was almost 100% guaranteed success and almost no risk. And a foolhardy person would run in when the risk was too great, or to save something trivial, such as risking her or his life to save his goldfish or something. The point is that Aristotle believes that every virtue is like this. Every virtue falls between two vices. It represents having the exact right amount of the trait. A kind of Goldilocks principle, if you will. Any more is too much, any less is too little. The virtue is just right. Let us also not lose track of why virtue is important. Remember that happiness is the ultimate good. So how is bravery related to happiness? For one thing, remember that Aristotle's concept of happiness is holistic. It includes reputation and one's place in society. Somebody who is cowardly is going to have a bad reputation, especially in Aristotle's day. But, more importantly, and still relevant, a person who is too cowardly will not take the risk in life necessary to get anywhere. It takes courage to risk failure at school to take the classes you are taking now. It takes courage to ask for a raise when one deserves one and feels that there is a reasonable chance of success. It takes courage to seek out a better career path. It takes courage to ask a person you think you could have a meaningful relationship with out on a date, and so forth. A cowardly person prevents herself or himself from some or all of these things and therefore loses many chances at happiness. Likewise, the foolhardy person takes foolish risks. This person might demand a raise when it is impossible, or when she or he doesn't deserve it. Or might quit a good job to try to get a better one when the chances are terrible. Or might just go out and put all of her or his entire savings on the roulette wheel in Vegas in the hopes of becoming rich. Such a person is unlikely to live a happy life either. So remember, happiness is the good, but the virtues help one achieve it. Let's do one more example. Here we will consider honesty or being truthful. What is the deficiency of being honest or of being a truth teller? It is of being dishonest or being a liar. Such a person cannot be trusted. This person is not likely to have a very happy life. Such a person would not be able to enter contracts with people because nobody would trust this person. Such a person would have few friends and taken into nobody's confidence. But can one tell the truth too much? Think carefully about this before you say no. Coming up with a word for it might be difficult, and there could be. One way you might be able to tell the truth too much is to be a braggart. A braggart is somebody who brags. Suppose that you say things that are true about yourself, but you are always bragging. Suppose that you are the first person in your family to go to college and are always bragging about this in a way to make other family members feel bad. Or suppose that you have more money than they do and are always pointing that out. You're not lying, but you're not being nice. Another way you can tell too much truth is to simply be too blunt. when being tactful is what is called for. You don't have to say that somebody looks horrible in what they are wearing. You could say that that person's pants look better than their other pair of pants, or that a different dress looks better than what they are wearing. Also, what about telling secrets? Or about being a gossip? You might be telling true things that you have no business telling. Or suppose that you want to use the truth as an excuse just to be a jerk. So you go around to your neighbors' houses on Christmas Eve, knock on the doors until children answer, and then tell them there's no Santa Claus. Ha 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 ha. You might be telling them the truth, but you'll probably end up with a bloody nose at some point anyways. So, it is living with the proper amount of truth-telling that is most conducive to living a happy life, according to Aristotle. And this is the level of the virtue. So to really drive this point home, let's contrast the golden mean of the virtues with the idea of a mathematical mean. The mathematical mean between 1 and 11 is 6. That is the number right in between. But when Aristotle talks about the mean for a virtue, he is talking about the relative mean and not a mathematical mean. The mean for virtues is between excess and deficiency. Aristotle compares it to anything that is so excellently made or done that any more would be excess and any less would be a deficiency. So the proper mean for a character trait to be displayed may be relative to the job one has and to the situation. For example, the appropriate level of bravery to show for a police officer may be different than for a normal citizen. So this shows an example with food. The appropriate amount of calories to take in is going to be different for an average 5'8" man and an Olympic weightlifter. It is not one size fits all, and the appropriate amount is not exactly in the center. It is not a mathematical mean, it is a relative mean. The same is true of character traits and the virtues. So the virtuous amount of something in terms of character doesn't have to be exactly between two extremes. Instead, it is relative to what is best. In other words, if people live their lives as cowards, they will be despised. But if they are foolhardy or take major risks for trivial reasons, they will not live long. Likewise, the proper amount of a trait might depend upon what a person does. For example, the correct amount of bravery for a soldier versus an average citizen might be different. Just as, in the above example, the right amount of food to eat might depend on who you are and what your lifestyle is. Acquiring virtues is not entirely up to the person. Unlike many theories of ethics, in virtue ethics, morality is partially a matter of luck. This is because gaining a virtue requires practice. If you are never put into a situation to exercise a particular virtue, you cannot gain it by practice. For example, if you are born so poor that everything is required for your own survival, then you would never have the opportunity to exercise generosity, and certainly not often enough to make it a habit. Likewise, if you are never in an apparently dangerous situation, how can you ever demonstrate bravery? So, our characters are largely but not completely under our control for Aristotle. And, even with perfect characters, remember, we are not guaranteed a happy life, but virtue is required for a happy life and gives us the best chance at one. So, now we are in a position to look at the entirety of the anatomy of virtue ethics. The good under the theory is happiness. The justification of this, just like it was with utilitarianism, is that happiness is the only ultimate end. It is complete in and of itself. But it is important to remember that happiness for Aristotle is holistic. It isn't mere pleasure. The method, according to the theory, is to practice the virtues until they become habit. The reason is that virtues, like skills or arts, are learned. They are neither natural to us nor unnatural to us. We have to practice them until they become second nature. When we get to the point where we behave in the virtuous way automatically, we truly have the virtue. One thing we haven't had time to mention yet, and something many people like about virtue ethics, is that having the appropriate emotional attitudes is important for Aristotle. For utilitarianism, what is important is doing the action that results in the most good. What is important for Kant is acting on the right reasons. Emotion is actually bad, it tends to get in the way. For Aristotle in virtue ethics, having the appropriate emotional response is a good thing. Virtuous people enjoy being virtuous. An honest person doesn't hate being honest or struggle with it. It is virtuous to get angry at injustice and to get pleasure from the right things. So, emotion can actually be a good thing if it's appropriate in virtue ethics. And on that note, I end this presentation. I hope that you found it helpful. Until next time.